Hello everybody and welcome to the week 13 video. I'd like to focus a little bit today on the general concept of flipped learning as well as how screencasting might be useful to fit within a flipped learning environment and the use of digital whiteboards within that environment and more broadly as well. And I want to talk also a little bit about the idea of interactivity and specifically how you might think of incorporating interactive resources into your multimedia project. The concept of flipped learning is really a pedagogical approach. It is a strategy that can be incorporated into class instruction where instead of having direct instruction happen as a whole class, it instead happens on a more individual level. And that frees up actual class time for more involved and interactive activities that involve groups of students perhaps, or maybe more interactivity between the teacher and individual students. But certainly it creates a different type of structure for homework because that would be used for the direct instruction. So it kind of changes the role of the teacher, which I know also happens with other kinds of strategies as well. But instead of the teacher lecturing in class, the teacher instead prepares the lecture for out-of-class time. I think this graphic actually illustrates the model pretty nicely. Basically, before students come to class, they are interacting with whatever materials the teacher has prepared, which could be video-based materials, it could be text-based materials, or whatever would be appropriate given what the teacher wants the student to learn. Then during class, the students actually can apply the concepts that were presented during the out-of-class activity, and then after class students check for understanding and maybe do some extension activities beyond that to ensure that they understand. There are several advantages to incorporating flipped learning activities into classrooms, one of which is that sometimes learners are asked to complete homework assignments when they really don't understand the concepts. I think particularly of homework in math. If the students don't really understand what they're doing, then having them go home and try to complete 10 or 15 problems doesn't really do a whole lot of good. So this particular model would allow them to basically do what was normally homework with assistance in the classroom. In addition, learners are able to interact with the content, the direct instruction content, at a pace that is appropriate for their level of learning and also perhaps is appropriate for their language level. So if a student needs to watch a video multiple times, he or she would have the ability to do that. Maybe they don't need to watch the entire video multiple times, but a passage in the video. So it would allow you as the instructor to basically provide the direct instruction in a way where there wouldn't be any kind of negative stigma attached if a student needed to have multiple iterations of that particular content. Also, content can be differentiated to learners at different levels. You don't have to provide the same video or instructional materials to everybody. You could provide them with choices. So it does require more work on your part if you wanted to make that happen, but at least it would give you the possibility of doing so. And then the other really big advantage is that it allows you to structure your in-class activity a lot differently than a more traditional kind of instructional strategy would. So instead of just having the direct instruction and students maybe being a little bit more passive, you can do some more dynamic activities within the classroom, maybe group activities, small group, large group. Maybe you can structure debates or a variety of other activities, and even some of the multimedia activities that take a lot of time, such as preparing videos, you would have the time to be able to make that work within your classroom. But there are also some disadvantages of flipped learning as well. One of the big issues is ensuring that the students are actually watching or viewing or interacting with whatever you assign as homework. Again, what would be traditionally considered direct instruction. So there are some ways that you might be able to make that happen, but honestly, if you assign other kinds of homework, there's always opportunity for students to find a way around doing that as well. So you do have a little bit of trade-off, and resources such as Edpuzzle and others do build some accountability in, but there is always the possibility that the students don't access the direct instruction as homework and could be coming into the class activity without adequate preparation. It also requires more upfront preparation time on the part of the teacher. So normally you would interact with students during the 45 or 50 or whatever number of minutes you have with them, and while you would prepare for that, you deliver it live to them. So in a flipped environment, you have to do the recording of that direct instruction piece or find resources if you're using materials that somebody else has created as part of your prep time. And then in addition to that, you have to prepare for what's going to happen in the class as well. There may be some issues with some of your students not having access to computers and the internet in their home environments, and so there are ways that you need to ensure that they will still have access to the materials. Preparing things that could be viewed on a smartphone is one alternative. Making sure that they have access before school, during lunch, and after school is another possibility. If your school has Chromebooks, you can basically create materials that could be watched offline. So there are ways around this as well, but you will need to plan for it if you have students for which that will be an issue. In terms of why I'm talking about the idea of flipped learning in this class, one is that the direct instruction piece is often delivered in a flipped learning environment as video. And because this is a multimedia course, the concept of having you record video that would be your resource fits in quite handily, I think. And also, if you're using existing resources that are created by others, such as materials from the Khan Academy, or there are multiple sites that you can gather materials from, you have the background now to be able to crop those resources, input those resources into programs like Edpuzzle or Sophia, which is another one we'll talk about later, to add a little bit of accountability to what the students are doing in them. And if you are recording, then we want to think about good practices with regard to producing your own video. So again, that's relevant to this class as well. I briefly mentioned that there could potentially be some problems with holding students accountable for the direct instruction piece because the traditional homework that you would normally assign is instead replaced with viewing a video or reading something. You do want to still know whether students are completing that or not. So if you can build in activities where students respond to questions while viewing, the questions could be something in Edpuzzle or another resource so that they see the questions as they are watching the video, but it could also be something like a document, a Google document that you refer them to that you want them to complete as they view the video. It could be they respond to questions on a blog. It could be a variety of things that you set up, but you do want to hold them accountable for that material. You want to know that they actually viewed the video. A former EdTech student, Dee Metcalf, did a study about flipped learning, and she was working with middle school math students, and what she found is that students found ways around answering the multiple choice questions that she used. She was using a resource called Sophia where she could post her videos, and then there were always at least 3 questions that they had to answer, but in Sophia they could continue to guess their answers until they got the question right, and then it would advance to the next question. So sometimes students just clicked randomly until they got the right answer in order to advance, and they didn't necessarily either watch the entire video or certainly do any work to comprehend the video. So it is just something that you need to think about, just as you would think about how you hold students accountable for any homework that you assign to them. Screencasts are often the resource of choice for the recording of flipped content, and the concept is really the idea of recording content that comes directly from the computer screen. So that would allow you to share information, often in a lecture style format, with or without the use of the web camera, where you basically set up an outline up front and then you deliver that with your narration. So this could include PowerPoint or Google Slides. You could augment images with text, arrows, and your narrative. You could include webcam footage so the students would actually see you, which personalizes things a little bit more. And you can also use what are called digital whiteboards. That they're really great if you have a tablet like an iPad, where you can record your audio directly into the image content that you are augmenting. It does work, screencasts work really well for flipped learning lessons, but in addition to that, there might also be situations in which you record really brief screencasts that would be available to students as needed, and maybe you post them to your class website, whether it's Google Classroom or if you're using Weebly or something else, where they could, if they chose, access that extra content on their own. The one thing that I want to say about screencasts is if you are recording them regularly for students, you have to let go the idea of making everything perfect. If you stumble a little bit, so be it. You do that in class sometimes as well. It's not worth taking all of the extra time to edit out little glitches that occur, because if you do that, you're going to end up spending so much time on the screencast itself that it might not be worth it anymore. So you have to kind of pick and choose and just accept that everything isn't going to always be 100% perfect. As you consider the concept of digital whiteboards, I just want you to know what they are basically. They are, sorry, there was one little glitch. They basically are interactive spaces where you can use the mouse or your finger or a stylus to interact with content on the screen, and often they allow you to record your narration along with them as well. And one of the really interesting uses of digital whiteboards is not necessarily to have you as the teacher using them to record content, although that certainly is viable and works well many times, but also if you wanted students to record themselves explaining something, there are resources out there that work really, really well for that, where students could then do the recording and then upload their recorded content so that you would have access to it for grading purposes. So this is a whiteboard space on my PC. It's just called a Whiteboard Notepad, or a really quick download. And if I wanted to, I could augment any image. So let's just say I had a lesson that was talking about erosion. I could post an image. It does allow me to resize the image and so on. And then I have different pens that I could use to add different things to the image. I can also add text to the image that could be moved around wherever I wanted to annotate something. So these digital whiteboards can be used in a way where if you wanted to talk about something live, it's another resource that can be used in addition to or separate from screencasting to make that happen. And just briefly, your multimedia project does require that you engage learners, whoever they are, in your project in some way with the content. So there are a lot of different things that you could do, and some of that will depend on whether your main focus is on students or parents or colleagues. And so I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of all of the different types of resources that are out there. Blogs and wikis are very common now in resources like Google Classroom and others. There's standalone blog and wiki sites where students can basically add their content, either moderated or unmoderated, and could create a really good dialogue. Today's Meet and other back channels might work really well for doing some of the same things. You can set up discussion boards that they would be able to access at a time that might be convenient for them. You can also see the discussion tree, which is sometimes useful. We've talked about Edpuzzle and you've worked with it before, so you know what that does. YouTube also has the capacity for you to add questions that students and other learners have to respond to while watching a video. I actually like Edpuzzle's version of it a little bit better, but if you wanted to do something completely in YouTube, you would have that option. Sophia is a resource that allows you to create, they call them tutorials, where you can import video content, so either video that you create or video that others have created, and then you can add questions that students have to respond to, and it tracks their responses. They are all multiple choice items. They cannot be open-ended items, but it would give some accountability to video. Nearpod is another resource where you can build interactivity into the resources that you have. Socrative and Poll Everywhere are resources that can be used to require students to use their digital devices to respond to items. We've worked with Padlet before in classes, and you're probably aware of both Google Docs and Google Forms already. This is not an exhaustive list. There's really a lot of different things that you can think about in terms of engaging your learners, whoever they are, in the learning process as you are implementing a lesson. And that's the end of the video lesson. There are a couple of questions for you to respond to at this point, and 2 other activities. We will have our last actual class with new content next week, which will be developing web pages so that you can create the last part of your multimedia assignment. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great week.